Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we begin the last blot of Masechta Horayos. We're going to start towards the bottom of Yud Gimel Amud Beis, the last line on the Amud. Mastni le'Rebbe le'Rab Shimon Berei. This comes here as a continuation to a story the Gemara brought before with Rab Shimon Gamliel and Rab Meir and Rab Nosson. Basically, the story was that Rab Meir and Rab Nosson were trying to remove Rab Shimon Gamliel from his position of being the Nasi, the leader. And their plan was that they're going to ask him questions on Masechta Uktzin, which is a Masechta they figured he will not be able to answer, and then he'll be removed as a Nasi. But their plan didn't work because there was someone that overheard their plan and went outside his house and was reading Masechta Uktzin loud, and he understood that this is for a reason, and he went and he studied Masechta Uktzin that night, and the next day, when they asked the questions, he was able to answer. And then when he found out that Rab Meir and Rab Nosson were trying to remove him as a Nasi, he gave them a penalty. And that was that Rab Meir was then called Achedim, and Rab Nosson was called Yesh Omrim. They brought their opinions, but not by name. Okay, so now in continuation to this, the Gemara brings as follows. Mastni le Rebbe le Rab Shimon Berei Achedim Omrim. Rebbe taught Rab Shimon, his son, the opinion of Rab Meir, and he said Achedim Ma'imrim, regarding what halacha was this. It was in the Mishnah. This is the last Mishnah of Masechta Bechayres. Ilu haya tmura lehaya karev. If this would have a halacha of a tmura, it wouldn't be brought as a carbon. Okay, so B'kitzur, what is this talking about? There's the halacha by Meiser Behema. It's the 10th. That is the Meiser Behema, and that behemoths are lined up and are walking out of a barn. And when the one that you hit with a red stick, the 10th, that's the one that's Meiser Behema. However, there's a chiddush regarding Meiser Behema that the 11th, if by mistake you called the 10th, the 11th that is, the 10th, it'll also be Meiser Behema. Okay, but now the question is, what status does this have? Do we say that this 11th is sort of like a Tumura? It's not really Meiser Behema. It's only like in the place of the real original Meiser Behema, which is the 10th. Now, halacha is when a behema is only a carbon because of it being a tmura. Tmura means that it's not the original carbon. It's a carbon that was put in place of another one. So that tmura cannot now be made as a tmura yet again to a third behema. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda there in the end of Bechayres says that this 11th that was called 10th, even though the Torah says it has a status of Ma'aseh behema, but not the original Ma'aseh behema, it has a status of a Tmura. Therefore, you can't then make yet again another Tmura from this one. However, Rab Meir,
10th and 11th, both are called 10?
That's the case.
Both are called 10.
Yeah. However, Rab Meir says that this 11th, what's the halacha with this? Rab Meir holds, what do you do with this 11th that was called a Ma'aseh behema when it really wasn't? It's brought like a carbon shlamim in the Beis HaMikdash. So this is the point. These are the words here now that Achedim, which is Rab Meir, he's saying that Ilu Haya Tmura. If Rab Yehuda was right that the status of this 11th that was called 10th was just like a Tmura, Lehaya Karev, it wouldn't be brought as a carbon shlamim, because Rab Yehuda holds, Rab Meir rather, right? Rab Meir holds that the Tmura of Ma'aseh Behema is not brought as a carbon. I think actually everybody agrees to that the Tmura of Ma'aseh Behema is not brought as a carbon. So therefore, Rab Meir proves from the fact that it is brought as a carbon for a shlomim, or like a shlomim, so we know that it's like itself a carbon. The chiddush of the Torah is that this 11th, that's now 10th, was called 10th, is like a carbon itself. That was the din that Rab Meir said, and Rabbi taught it to his son, Rab Shimon, and he didn't say the name of Rab Meir, he said Achedim. Oh Maloi, so Rab Shimon says to his father, Mi'e Malalu, who are these individuals? Shemeimeim Anushaisim, we are drinking from their waters, but we don't mention them by name. So why Rab Meir, which said this halacha, are we not mentioning by name? Amalei, so Rabbi says to him, Bnei Yadam, these are individuals, shebikshu laker kvoidcha, they wanted to uproot your honor, a kvoid beis avicha, and the honor of your father, or the house of your father, which is your grandfather, Rab Shimon Gamliel, which was his grandfather. Because Rab Meir, together with Rab Nosson, as mentioned before, wanted to remove Rab Shimon Gamliel from being the Nasi, and it's from then that there was this knas that they should not be called by name, and therefore I refer to him as Achedim. Amalei, so Rab Shimon answered his father and said, but it's not relevant anymore now. Because Gam Avasam, Gam Sin Nasam, their love or their hatred, Gam Kinasam or their jealousy, Kfar Avda. It's already gone. It's not relevant anymore because it only applies when they're alive. But now, after they passed away, you're going to still continue the same thing, not to mention them by name. What's the point? Amalei, so Rebbe answers, no, there's another pasuk where it says, Ha'oyev Tamu, even after the enemy is gone, he passed away, but Charavais, the sword that's fighting him, Lizlanetzach, is forever. Amalei, so Rab Shimon tells his father, but Hani Mili, when is that the case, that the sword is forever? Heiche da'ahanu masai. If the actions of the enemy had some effect, so you have to fight back forever. But Rabbanon, these Rabbanon, which is Rab Meir, Rab Nasan, le'ahanu masayu, the actions that they tried to do to remove Rav Shimon Gamliel didn't even work. So they got their knas in their lifetime, but now there's no reason to continue referring to Rab Meir as a chayrim. So after this, Rebbe that is, gave in to what his son was demanding. Hada asnile, so he taught him again, Omru Mishum Rab Meir, that it was said in the name of Rab Meir. That Ilu Hayatmura Lehayakarev. If this 11th that was called 10th had it had the status of a Tamura, it wouldn't be brought as a carbon shlamim, and that proves that it has a status like a carbon itself. Omar Rava, so Rava commented about this, that Rabbi did call Rab Meir by name, but he didn't say like very directly. So Afila Rabbi, the Anvisana Sahu, so even Rabbi that was humble, and he accepted what his son said, and he changed, and he called him by name, to Tana, he still only taught Omru Mishum Rab Meir. It was said in the name of Rab Meir. But Rab Meir Omar, Lo Yomar. Rab Meir Omar.
Omru Mishum Rab Meir Omar.
Omru Mishum Rab Meir Omar. Okay. Yeah, the name he did that they said in the name of Rab Meir, that's what he said. But Omar Rab Meir Lo Yomar.
No.
Rab Meir.
Without the Omar twice.
Rab Meir Lo Yomar. Okay, sorry. Okay, good. Rab Meir Lo Yomar. However, he didn't say that this is what Rab Meir said.
Yeah. Interesting, because other places, you see sometimes in other places it says that.
I think maybe I read it before, right? When it said, Tana, again, I feel it Rebbe, the Anvisanehu, Tana, Omri Mishum Rab Meir. Oh, yeah. Omar Rab Meir Lo Yomar. Okay, good. Okay. Yeah. What were we saying? Okay. Akapanim, this we'll discuss this soon. This whole incident here, this whole story, the Rebbe spoke about this in a sikha. We'll see soon. Well, I'll explain
really
soon.
It's meaning that somebody else later on could say, okay, I could do it again because nothing's going to happen really.
Let's see. Okay, I'll explain soon. The Rebbe explains what's going on. We were talking about the greatest of great people, these Tanoim. It's not to be understood on a simple level. Sagt die Gemara weiter, Rab Yechanan, Pliege bar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel v'Rabbanan. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel and the Rabbanan had the following argument. Chad Amar Sinai Odef. One said that being a Sinai is stronger, is better. Sinai means someone that knows all the Mishnayos, all the Braises clearly. Like Sinai means like it was given directly from our Sinai, he has the proficiency in everything. Another opinion though is Oiker Harim Odif, one that is very sharp, and he could discuss Torah with all the questions and answers, like someone that can uproot mountains. That's stronger, that's better. Rav Yosef Sinai, so the Gemara says regarding certain Amiraim here, that Rav Yosef was in the level of Sinai, he knew all the Braises, everything, all the Mishnayos. Rabbe was Oiker Harim. Rabbe, however, his mile was the fact that he was able to uproot mountains and discuss things in that way. So Shalchul Taman, they sent to ask the question there to Eretz Yisrael, Eizemem Kaidim, who comes first? In other words, the question then was, they had to appoint a new Rosh Hashiva. Who should they appoint? Rav Yosef or Rabba? Shalchul, so from Eretz Yisrael, they sent back to say, Sinai Odif, that Sinai is greater. What's the reason? Because the Amar, the master has taught, Hakoil Tzrichin L'Marech Chetaya. Everybody needs the one that has the basic grain to feed to. So over here as well, you could have the great pulpulim and the great discussions and questions if you're very sharp, like a Oika Harem, but if you're missing the Bekias that there is and the Sinai that knows all the Mishnayos and Braises, so then you're lacking and you're learning. You have to first have the Sinai. Everybody relies on him. So now, so that was concluded that Rav Yosef is greater. But nevertheless, like Kaval, Rav Yosef Alei, Rav Yosef did not accept to be the Rosh Hashiva. Malach Rabbe, Esrin v'Tartnishnin. So first Rabbe was king, or he was Rosh Hashiva for 22 years, and only after he passed away, V'Hada Malach Rav Yosef. Only then did Rav Yosef take over to become the Rosh Hashiva. V'Chol Shani, all of the years, the Malach Rabbe, when Rabbe was the Rosh Hashiva, Rav Yosef was very careful. Rav Yosef was very careful not to show any sign of him taking any leadership. Afilu umne lebeise lecholif. A umne, which is a bloodletter or a doctor, he did not invite the doctor to come to treat him in his home, because that was only something for distinguished individuals. Otherwise, you go to the doctor. The doctor would come to Rabbe's home. He was the Rosh Hashiva, and there in Rabbe's home, Rav Yosef could be treated, but he didn't bring the doctor to his home to not even show any sign of him. He was completely under the rulership of Rabbe for all these years. That shows the humility of Rav Yosef. Don't forget, Rav Yosef is also the one that says in the end of Masech Seitel, "Tisni anove the Ika no," right? So yeah. Okay, the Gemara concludes the story. Abaye v'Rave v'Rabzeire and v'Rabbe bar Masna. So these four Amiroim, Havi Yosvi, they were sitting together. And they needed a head, a Rosh Hashiva, to lead them. Okay, so now actually, simply the Gemara here is saying a new incident that has nothing to do with before. But there are some Mefarshim that say that this is being brought here because it's continuation of the story. Because after Rav Yosef passed away, so now they were looking for a new Rosh Hashiva. Amri, so they said, how are we going to find who's the right one? Whoever's going to say something and he's not going to be refuted, he is going to be the head. So what happened? The kulu ifrach, all the different things that each one of them tried to say was refuted. The Abaye loy ifrach, but then when Abaye said something, he could not be refuted. So Chazi Rabbe saw it should be Rave, because this is after Rabbe passed away. Rave saw Abaye, the Goveresha, that he's raising his head, that he was the one that was appointed to be the Rosh Hashiva because no one was able to refute him. Amalei, so he says to Abaye Nachmeni. That was Abaye was called Abaye bar Nachmeni. He tells him Nachmeni because he was Rashi he brings he's called Nachmeni. So we used to call him Nachmeni. So Rashi brings over here one opinion, or there's an apprentice in Rashi that was actually Loshen Genai that he referred to him Nachmeni. And he was trying to tell him, you're still a student of Rav Nachman, even though you're going to become now the Rosh Hashiva. So he tells him, Nachmeni, Pasach ve'eme, open up your mouth and say a halacha and teach. So he became the Rosh Hashiva then, Abaye. Okay, now the Gemara concludes, Ibayaluhu, the Shaila was asked, amongst the other of the Amiroim that were there, Rabzeire ve'Rabbe bar Masna. Between the two of them, who is stronger? Rabzeire was a charav for Maksha. Rabzeire was very sharp. He could ask questions and immediately give answers with his sharp understanding. But Rabbe bar Masna, Mosun umasek. Rabbe bar Masna was slower, more thorough and methodical, and he would give an answer which was a conclusion that could be used aliba de hilchas, Rashi says. Not just give quickly questions and answers, but it was aliba de hilchas. So what's the halach in such a case? Or who is stronger? Who is Charav from Maksha Muslim Masik? Take, this remains unresolved. But the Mefarshim actually say that it's a little bit of a pellet. This is something that the Gemara does not resolve. It would seem clear that the one that could be more thorough and give a psaktin la halacha has a greater maila. And the Meiri over here says that it's clear that the one that has the ability to paskin la halacha is definitely in a higher level, is the one that should be appointed as the Rosh Hashiva. Hadran Allah Kayim Mashiach Aslik Allah Masechta Horayos. So regarding this, we see him here in the Masechta. The Rebbe once spoke about this. They made a siyum together on what it says here in the end of Horayos, and also the siyum on Masechta B'chayris, because this halacha that was quoted here with the name Achayrim is the last Mishnah in Masechta B'chayris. And the Rebbe explained the question that the Mefarshim discuss after it brings the story about Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and Rab Meir and Rab Nosson, and then the conversation of Rebbe with his son Rab Shimon about why they were calling him Achayrim and not Rab Meir. Then the Gemara brings up this machlokes between Rab Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanon, whether Sinai is adif or Oika Harim is adif. What's the connection of that argument to the discussion before? So the Be'er Sheva, one of the early Achrayim, says in the Pshat in the Gemara that the argument between Rab Shimon Gamliel and Rab Meir and Rab Nosson was regarding this subject. Which one is Adif? Is Sinai Adif or is Eika Harem Adif? They weren't stam arguing about a personal thing over here, who's going to be the Rosh Hashiva. There was a real argument in the Shitta. What are they going to be promoting? What is the right approach? The union of Sinai or the union of Eika Harem? Now, the way the Rebbe puts it, and this is actually the opposite of the way the Be'er Sheva says it, the Rebbe proves there that Rab Meir was the one that was the Eika Harem. The Rebbe brings a Gemara in Sanhedrin that says clearly that Rab Meir was Eikir Horei Harem v'Teichnan. He uprooted mountains up on top of other mountains and was able to grind them. That's how deep and the powerful his learning was. That was Rab Meir. On the other hand, Rab Shimon Gamliel was the one that was Sinai. He was the one that was Baki in his learning. So that was the argument over here. Which one is Adif? If you see here in the Lashon of the Gemara, when it says Rab Shimon Gamliel argued with the Rabbanon, so it says Chadam Sinai, Chadam. So the first Chadam Sinai. The rule usually is, even if it doesn't say who says what, the first Chad goes on the one that was mentioned first, which is Rab Shimon Gamliel. He said Sinai is Adif, and Rab Meir and Rab Nosson together, both were Eika Harem. From the story before, though, it would seem that the opposite is true, because the story before was that they were trying to catch him in Masechta Uktzin. If Rab Shimon Gamliel was a Baki, why did they think that he didn't know Masechta Uktzin? But the Rebbe says, if he definitely knew Masechta Uktzin, but not on the level of Eika Harem. They were going to ask him deep questions on Masechta Uktzin in order to try to show him that he doesn't know the Masechta properly. That was the argument over here. And the Rebbe says that this is not just an argument regarding learning and teaching who's better, Sinai or Eika Harem, but it's a broader argument, b'chlal b'negei to the approach of many different halachas and shas, where there's the discussion whether you follow kamos, the ribuya kamos, or ribuya echos. What outweighs what? More quantity or quality? And the Rebbe explains how this is connected actually to this subject of the halacha regarding the Tamura of the 11th that was called Meiser, whether it's only a Tamura or not. We'll see that Mitzvah Shem when we learn Masechta B'chayres. But the point the Rebbe says over here is, very interesting vart, that this that we find in Shas, many times, that Rab Meir is actually called by his name Rab Meir. Many Mishnahs he's called Rab Meir, most actually. But there are some where he's called Acherim. Why is that? If the Gemara is saying that there was a Knas, why isn't he called Acherim in every single Mishnah? Why most Rab Meir? So the Rebbe answers, because only in those Mishnayos, which was after this incident, and also he's expressing his shitta in this inyan of Eika Harem, that his shitta that he's saying in that particular halacha is coming to say the inyan that Eichos is stronger, that the quality which is expressed by being a Eika Harem is stronger. It's only in those halachas that he's called with the name Acherim, because Acherim expresses that. Acherim means he's of a different caliber. Rab Meir is on a different level in his learning and being a Eika Harem. But in the other halachas where Rab Meir said his opinion, but it's not connected to his general shitta of Eika Harem and Eichos, there he's mentioned by his name Rab Meir. So therefore the Rebbe teaches that when they gave him this penalty that he should be called with the name Acherim, it would seem that it was just like a random penalty that they penalized him with, that he wouldn't be mentioned by name. But the Rebbe says, no, it wasn't a random thing. It was an inyan of a shitta. There was a real argument here in the shitta. So b'negei to those halachas where he expressed his opinion of Eichos being stronger, and Rab Shimon Gamliel felt very strongly to know that the Kamas is stronger, it's specifically regarding those halachas that he didn't mention his name. So people should always remember that it's in this detail that they held that Rab Meir wasn't right. And that's why Rebbe said, Charavis lenetzach, that this is something which is negeya for the future, not even after he passed away, to make it clear that his approach that Eichos is stronger is incorrect. But rather it's the Eichos which is stronger. And even after Rebbe did say Rab Meir's name, he only said Mishum Rab Meir. So it should be clear that we don't hold like Rab Meir regarding the subject.
His son said it.
The Rebbe himself also changed. The Rebbe also changed and said Mishum Rab Meir. Mishum Rab Meir. So that's the pshat in this machlokes. It's a really a deeper machlokes in the shittis and how to learn Torah. It's negeya here, it's negeya to a lot of different inyanim. So this is the siyum of Masechta Horayos and also the siyum of the entire Seder Nezikah and Mazel Tov.